Hey guys, Carlos here with TAC1 Fabrication. What I got for you today is a hopefully short and general assembly instructions on a new product that I've come out with, which is a mock-up transfer case. And this transfer case is made to emulate the general dimensions within a 1/4 inch of the popular Atlas II transfer case. The majority of you guys buying this don't probably need assembly instructions. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I wanted to go ahead and go over a few things on the design itself and why I built it this way. The first thing is it's made out of 16 gauge sheet metal, and that's really lightweight. Obviously it's not going to be very structural, but the reason I made it this way is because shipping flat, it's very lightweight to ship, won't cost you a lot of money to get it to your location. It only package weight is only like 9.5 or 10 pounds, and it just makes it extremely versatile and modular to where you can throw it around, you can bolt it up. It's just easy and convenient that way. The transfer case dimensions itself, or the mock-up transfer case dimensions themselves, are within a 1/4 of an inch of the genuine article or the real thing. The standoffs on the back, as a fabricator, you could probably beef them up a little bit and figure out a way to bolt your drive shafts to them. Although I would not recommend you measure off the mock-up transfer case for your final drive shaft dimensions if you're having drive shafts built. That's pretty obvious. The transfer case, the mock-up transfer case, is made to be a placeholder for you to design and fabricate around. Pretty obvious stuff, but I guess I got to throw it out there. The standoffs on the back and the front, the drive shaft output standoffs, are meant to be measured to the center line of a 1350 or 1410 Ujoint. And the standoff on the back of this mock-up transfer case represents the non-speedometer output that comes on Atlas transfer case. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this video is you can configure this mock-up transfer case in driver drop or passenger drop front output if you want. So it's modular, pretty self-explanatory again, but I want to just sort of go over it real quick, show you what I do to assemble, and you guys can rock and roll. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the parts that will come shipped flat in your package. Now what we have here is the rear case half, and the way you can identify the rear case half is it's got these three slots up at the top. This is the top. I put this in here so you could figure out what direction. These bottom things represent the bolts on the bottom of the case for the case cover. So anyway, the rear half has these three slots up at the top. The front half has these four slots right here that key in the transmission input. You're going to have 5 of these case spreaders or standoffs that emulate the width of the transfer case. You'll have 2 of these transmission input and clocking ring standoffs. You'll have 2 of these front output standoffs, and you can identify these because they're shorter than the rear output standoff. Here are your 2 rear output standoffs. Here are your 2 U-joint output faces, and I designed it like this because you could beef this up a little bit, and if you had U-strap U-joints, you could drill in these here and bolt your U-straps to this if you wanted to. If your U-joints aren't really heavy, and you'll see there's going to be some deflection in the 16 gauge if you have it hanging off your transmission, but you can make that judgment call when you get there. This here is the rear shifter case cover. So that little standoff that comes out for the ship rails on the back of the transfer case, and I'll show you. It's got relief cuts in here, and you just got to bend this over your bench. Real easy and simple stuff. And then last but not least, your transmission input plate and clocking ring. Okay. So we'll go ahead and assemble this real quick. Pretty easy, self-explanatory. Just wanted to go over a few details, and you guys can be on your way. Okay, so what you're going to need to assemble this, well, I guess you don't need it, but it'd be really helpful just to have one of these 90-degree magnets. And then you're going to need a couple pieces of plate of some kind for a standoff, so you can stand the part off of your work surface so that you have clearance for the tab to go through the slot. Here are the details I wanted to talk to you about. So I don't know what's more common or not, but the reason why I kind of wanted to go over this was because you can configure this case as a driver front output or a passenger front output. So you can identify that by these 4 slots right here are for your standoffs for your transmission input and clocking ring. So right now, if the front of the vehicle were going away from me, I'm sitting to the rear, this would be a passenger front output. That's how it would be configured. Flip this around. Transmission input and clocking ring adapter would be right here. This would be a driver front output. Okay, so that's why I kind of wanted to go over this and show you this is how I designed it. It's modular, it all keys together, and if you do that, once you figure out what you need, either a driver or passenger front output, you're going to have to make the rear match up. And it's easy to screw this up, trust me, I've already done it. So if you're making a driver front output, you need to make sure that these 2 vertical slots right here that are going to take and accept the rear output standoffs line up with your 4 transmission input slots. Hopefully that makes sense. So in other words, if my if I was going to make this a driver front drop output, this is the way I would configure it, with these 2 rear outputs lining up with the transmission input. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll just say it one more time, and I know I tend to repeat myself. The 2 slots for the rear case half, these 2 short slots right here that house the rear output for the case, need to line up with whatever side your transmission input slots are. And we'll go ahead and put this together, and you'll kind of get sort of an idea of what I'm talking about, hopefully. Okay, so having confused myself a few times on the way this goes together, probably the easiest way for you to identify what is to take the 2 case halves and, using your magnet, just put them up on your table like this. We know this is the front. We know this is the rear because the rear's got the 3 slots up here for the shifter case or the shifter rod cover. We want this to be a driver drop front output. These 4 slots here represent the transmission input, transmission on this side, rear output on this side. So probably the easiest thing to do now is just to take your Sharpie and mark this as FO, which represents front outside, this as RO, which represents rear outside. The inside of the case being here, and this is where the case spreader standoffs are going to go. So when I lay this down flat on the table, I know in which orientation those case standoffs need to go. You've got 5 of these case standoffs, or spreaders, whatever you want to call them, and they just go like this. These shouldn't be a really tight fit. I didn't want to make them a really tight fit because I didn't want you to have to pound or, you know, push these in, because this is only 16 gauge and I didn't want you to tweak it. I'm going to just go ahead and take my magnet. I'll just push this to the outside of the slot, make sure it's fully seated in there, and I'm just going to tack weld the corners on each one of these. Okay, so there is our back case half. We'll just set this aside for now, and we're going to go to building our outputs with our standoffs on them. So this is your rear. These are the longer standoffs. Okay, now our front output. Front output's got these shorter standoffs. And now our transmission input and clocking ring. These little short standoffs just go like this. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is bend up our shift rail cover. And I'm going to move you over here so you can kind of see how I do it. These got relief marks cut into them, so you should be able to just, this is only 16 gauge, should be able to just bend this over the edge of your bench. Okay, that's all there is to it. You might need to tweak it a little bit when you go to install it on the back of the case, but should be good to go. Okay, so we got our shims here. This is our front case half, and we mark this. We know this is the front outside. The standoffs need to come out through this side on this face, and it's super simple to get confused because I just did it again. Now all we need to do is take our rear case half that we've already tacked our standoffs on and line up all the tabs and slots. There we go. Should just slide right in, no problem. You should have access to weld. There we go, super simple. And since we have the rear faced up right now, we'll just go ahead and tack in our rear output. And our shift rail cover. That just took a little persuasion to line up. Now we'll move over to the front. Now since this is going to be uneven to stand up, you might just take a block or something and put it underneath this end to keep it upright and somewhat level. Or just use your magnet. That ends up being about right. Now we have our transmission input and clocking ring. That doesn't quite line up, so I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze this in a little. Another reason why you only want to tack it together. There we go. It's in. Just want to make sure it's flush on the tab and slot there. And before I rotate this and tack the other side, I'll just go ahead and put this front output. Now we can rotate and tack weld the other side. All right, that's it. We have a mock-up transfer case ready to bolt up. But one thing I will say is make sure you identify the inside and outside of your case halves. In other words, clearly mark them with a Sharpie or whatever you need to do to make sure you don't get mixed up on which side the standoffs need to be welded, to make sure that you have the input lined up with the rear output. Everything on these is reversible, and obviously I designed it that way. So it's real easy to get confused. I confused myself again doing this video because I wasn't paying attention, and luckily I caught it before I started welding. It's real easy to do. The other thing I want to note is right here on the input, if you need a flat face to bolt to your transmission, you're going to need to grind down these tabs to get this to sit flat and flush. For your transmission adapter, you're on your own. I don't know, there's so many different transmissions to bolt Atlases up to. There's so many different adapters. You're going to have to, what I'm working with on a current build is a Turbo 400. So the width of that adapter is pretty easy to emulate and mock up with some sheet metal. You can just copy this bolt pattern and bolt it right to it. Whatever you need to do creatively as a fabricator, you guys know what to do. All right, guys, that concludes our assembly video. As you know, the wait for Atlas transfer case is quite a few months. I think it's 8 last I checked. This will keep you going on your build. Put this in place, build around it, and keep on making progress while you're waiting for that transfer case to come in. I saw a need for these, and hopefully you do too. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.